Almost 4 years back, I was in a hotel in Shanghai. I had just checked in and stepped into the lift and pressed my floor. And then the lift door opened again. Nobody walked in. Instead, a machine rolled in beside me quietly as if it did every other day. A few floors later, the door opened and the machine rolled out. Curiosity got the better of me, so I followed it. It glided down the corridor, stopped in front of a room, and then rang the bell. The guest opened the door, took the delivery from its compartment, and the machine turned around and rolled back the way it came in. Room service delivered by a robot and sharing the lift with me like any other member of the hotel staff. At that time, this was new and maybe perhaps one of the most novel services anywhere in the world. But today in China, it is completely ordinary. It is in major hotels across the world now. And that little robot in the lift is a perfect place to begin today's story. Because the question I want to explore is this: are we actually heading into the world we saw in Star Trek serial and all those science fiction films? Robots in our workplace, AI colleagues, machines that think? Or are we watching one of the greatest investment bubbles in history inflate before our eyes? And there is a twist to the story. The last time a bubble like this burst, India was one of the biggest winners. Watch the full story where I explain this twist. Let me first talk about the future that is genuinely arriving, because a lot of it is no longer fiction. Think about what Star Trek serial, which many of you might have watched, promised us. A computer you simply talk to and it answers everything. We have that now, and hundreds of millions of people use it almost every other day. A universal translator, it sits in our phones. And now the machines are getting bodies. Humanoid robots are moving from lab demos into factories and warehouses. Amazon alone operates hundreds of thousands of robots in its fulfillment centers. Well, my Shanghai room service robot has cousins delivering machines in hospitals and serving foods in restaurants. But the researchers looking further ahead describe something far stronger than robots at your door. One widely discussed report is of Daniel Cocatillo, which imagines the world of 2040, makes a point that is interesting but scary also. The AI companies are no longer just building better chatbots. They are building AI that improves AI itself. Each generation of AI helps design the next one faster. Researchers call it an intelligence explosion, and some project that by around 2030, AI research itself could be almost fully automated. And at that point, human would be approving systems whose internal reasoning we no longer fully understand. Follow that thread and the projections become worrying. By the early 2030s, companies could be running tens of millions of AI agents working continuously at many times human speed. Robotics follows the software, and physical automation could multiply economic output in ways we have never seen. Some scenarios project that by 2035, AI and robots do the overwhelming majority of economic work, and the jobs that remain human are the ones we actively want human to do. Athletes, artists, caregivers, religious leaders, and of course, yes, politicians. Now, are these projections certain? Absolutely not. They are scenarios and not forecasts. But even the direction should make every business owner sit up. Because service companies, and I may say looking at my own industry, are exactly where AI enters fastest. It does not need a body to do office work. It just needs a login. Now, the technology story is moving on to become a geopolitical story, something which I talk about in many of my episodes. That same 2040 report framed the AI race in the language of nuclear weapons. No company believes it can afford to slow down first. No country believes it can afford to slow down first. America fears China is reaching superintelligence first, and China fears America. And both sides race at the full speed towards the technology neither can fully control. The report sketches failure modes that sounds like Cold War history repeating. Loss of control, a powerful AI seized by whoever grabs it first, or in the darker scenario, one power striking the other's data center out of fear. In fact, its proposed answer is also borrowed straight from the Cold War playbook. A pause on training the very largest new models, verified the way nuclear material was accounted for in the 1990s. That is, a global registry of AI chips, mutual inspection inside American and Chinese data centers, echoing the arms control treaties of the 1980s. And this is the part that matters most to us, expanding that pact into broader consortium of nations. India is named in that list, alongside the UK, France, Germany, Japan and South Korea. Think about what that means. In the nuclear age, India fought for decades for a seat at the table. In the AI age, the serious proposal already assumed India is at the table. Whether any of this diplomacy actually happens is anyone's guess. But the shape of the conversation tell you AI is no longer a Silicon Valley story, but it is an India story also. It is a story of chips, power, treaties and verification, or in other words, it is a logistic and geopolitical story. Then the next question comes, which is $1 trillion one. Big technology companies are planning to spend in the range of $650 to $700 billion in AI infrastructure in 2026 alone. That is, chips, data centers and power plants. In fact, AI companies captured over 60% of all venture capital in the world last year. These are numbers with no precedent. But there is an uncomfortable data point. An MIT study found that 95% of organizations were getting zero return on their generative AI investments so far. Spending is rising far ahead of proven earnings. Whenever that happens in history, people start whispering one word. It's a bubble. So, is it one? To answer that, let me tell you about the last time this happened, as I mentioned earlier on the India connection. Let me start with the late 1990s. The internet was new and there was a belief repeated in every boardroom that internet traffic was doubling every 100 days. If that were true, the world would need almost infinite bandwidth. So, American telecom companies went on a spending spree based on this belief. Companies like Global Crossing and Level 3 borrowed billions of dollars and laid millions of miles of fiber optic cable across America, under the Atlantic, under the Pacific and around the world. Then the dot-com bubble burst in 2000 and the truth came out. The traffic numbers were fantasy. By most estimate, 85% to 95% of all that fiber sat completely unused. They even gave it a name, the dark fiber. Global Crossing went bankrupt with billions in debt. Cornings, then the world's biggest fiber maker, saw its stock fall from nearly $100 to around just $1. The whole companies vanished. But here is a beautiful part of the story. The cables did not vanish. They were brought out of bankruptcy for a fraction of their cost, lit up over the following years, and suddenly the world had an ocean of ridiculously cheap bandwidth. And who used that bandwidth? Among the biggest beneficiaries was India. Cheap international connectivity is one of the foundations on which our entire IT services and BPO revolution was built in Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune and Gurgaon. Millions of jobs, decades of growth and American investors paid for the cables. Their shareholders took the losses and India in a way harvested the opportunity. One era's bubble became another nation's launchpad. Maybe it's time that history might repeat itself. To explain the AI scaling, let me show you a map, because the phrase AI hides 5 very different businesses stacked on top of each other. At the bottom is power. Every data center is ultimately an electricity story, and above that sits the chips, the GPU everyone is fighting over. And above the chips sits the hyperscalers, the giant cloud companies that rent out all that computing. Above them sit the large language model. And at the very top sit the application layer, the actual product that businesses and people use. Once you see the stack, the real question comes up. Where does India stand in it? Let me be honest. In chip fabrication, the cutting-edge factories, India is not in the race for the next 4 or 5 years. Those plants cost over tens of billions and take years to build. But there is something which people miss. India does not fabricate the chip, but Indian engineers design them. Bangalore alone has an enormous base of chip design and embedded software professionals, and which is by some industry estimate that over 3 lakh of them working inside almost every major semiconductor company in the world. The chip may be made in Taiwan or Arizona, but the good part of their brains are down in Bangalore. But there is a layer we need to watch carefully because it connects straight back to our fibre story. The large language model, the layer soaking up most capital, may be the layer most likely to become a commodity. Every giant model can already write your mails and summarize your documents. When products become interchangeable, prices collapse and the capital that built them struggles for return. If that happens, value flows away from the model builders and downward to power and chips and upward into applications. And that is exactly the fibre pattern repeating. The companies that laid the cables went bust. The value went to everyone who used the cables cheaply. The model builders may be laying today's cables. And that's precisely where India's opportunity sits. Not in the capital furnace at the middle of the stack, but at the top in applications where our millions of engineers live, and increasingly at the bottom in the power and design work the whole stack depends on. So now the big question. If AI turns out to be overbuilt, could the same thing happen again? And could India benefit again? Let me be honest about both sides because I do not believe this can be a one-sided story. The case that is different this time is strong. In 1999, the fibre was dark and today there is no dark GPUs. Every AI chip that ships is reserved, deployed and running hot. The demand is real and immediate. Real revenue is being generated. And valuation, while high, are nowhere near the madness of dot-com days when companies traded at over 150 times their earnings. But the case for caution is also real. Spinning of this scale assumes AI adoption will grow fast enough to pay for it, and that a mighty finding of zero returns for most companies tell you adoption is messier than the headlines suggest. Chips also age much faster than fiber. A cable laid in 1999 still works today. A GPU bought today may be obsolete in 4 or 5 years. So, if this bubble bursts, the leftovers may be worth less than the dark fiber was. Still, imagine the scenario. If there is an AI bubble burst, the world will be left with a surplus of data centers, power infrastructure, trained models, and open source AI that anyone can use cheaply. Compute prices would collapse, and who benefit when a powerful technology suddenly becomes cheap? The countries with the talent, hunger, and scale, that is, countries like India. Just as we built an IT industry on cheap fiber we never paid for, we could build an AI application industry on cheap compute and open models that others funded. In fact, we do not even need a crash for this. Every open model release, every price cut in AI service is already a subsidy from Silicon Valley's investors to Indian engineers. So, boom or bubble, there is an Indian opportunity hiding inside both outcomes. And remember, India's growth engine does not run on AI capital anyways. It runs on the consumption of hundreds of billions of rising households and a huge capex cycle at home. Serious voices project India as a 10 trillion economy within a decade. The AI wave is a multiplier on that engine, not the engine itself. The only losing move is to sit out and watch. Now, let me bring the story back to that machine which rolled into my lift in Shanghai. That day, following it down the corridor, I was not just watching a delivery. I was watching a preview. The future does arrive. It just never arrives on the schedule the investors promise. The internet changed the world, but only after breaking the companies that built it first. And the 2040 report I mentioned ends on a question which cannot be ignored and should make us think. If AI robots one day do most of the world's work, humans may become wealthier than ever, but work is also where people have always found purpose, identity, and bargaining power. Abundance without purpose is its own kind of crisis, which is why the report's final insistence matters. Whatever AI become, it must stay transparent, distributed and accountable, and not concentrated in few hands. And I do hope and believe India is well prepared. If this episode made you think, do like, share and subscribe, and tell me in your comments, do you think AI is a boom or a bubble? I read every comment and I look forward for that. Thank you.